So we're going to keep moving forward with our idea of fragmented populations. If you fragment a population, you're breaking down its ability to survive because you're stopping it from interbreeding and passing alleles between beneficial alleles between populations. We got to sustain biodiversity by minimizing that fragmentation. We can minimize, it really did work going right into the next one. We can minimize fragmentation by connecting these broken populations using what are called movement corridors. There are very narrow strips of habitat that allow populations to begin to interact with each other. While this grass is a movement corridor, what's more important here is the stream. What they did in this area is they broke 2 ponds apart. They broke one lake into this dry area so they could put a bridge over. That lake, when you have 2 parts of the lake, now has a fragmented population. You've got a population in Lake A and a population in Lake B. In order to maintain biodiversity, they created this pass-through, literally this little water bridge here that fish can swim from one side to the other, bringing with them their beneficial alleles. It allows for that population to remain whole. You'll also see movement corridors sometimes along interstates, where if you were to either look above or below the road, you'll see basically grassland. Sometimes they've converted bridges into grassland in order to allow deer to pass from one side of the road to the other. Which is really funny because then people are like, why aren't deer crossing there? They're like, deer crossing? Why aren't they crossing at the sign? Like, people are dumb. But deer learn, and wolves and other organisms, that you can cross safely if you go across that bridge that's created, that 200-foot wide bridge. So what that does is these movement corridors promote dispersal and they reduce inbreeding. This is the original population over here. You've taken fragmented circular populations and you've allowed them to mate together. They're passing their genes back and forth and keeping a healthy genetic diversity. So one way of promoting biodiversity is by promoting movement corridors. Another way is by protecting what are known as biodiversity hot spots. And you see this a lot in the United States with nature preserves. Basically, these are areas in which there's a lot of biodiversity. It's focused in a very small region. And if we protect the very small region, it will have an enormous outward effect. These hotspots might have many endemic species that are only located there, and also likely have a whole bunch of endangered species. Coral reefs are one of the hotspots in aquatic ecosystems. Why? Because coral reefs provide a place for baby fish, just like we talked about with kelp forests. They have a huge amount of biodiversity. There's lots and lots of different fish there with lots of different alleles. So by protecting coral reefs, you protect baby fish, which then populate the larger ocean, and you protect the large genetic variation of those fish. If we did not protect coral reefs, we lose all that genetic diversity. In Virginia, we have a whole bunch of nature reserves. These are going to be sort of islands of nature located throughout the state. For us, we have different stewardship regions in Virginia. And you'll notice that there's lots of there are red dots for the ones that are owned by the state. Blue dots are ones that are operated by the state but not owned by the state. And you see, these are regions that were picked not just because somebody donated land, but because in those specific regions are organisms that are not found anywhere else in Virginia, and they have a high degree of genetic diversity throughout that region. If all the regions around them are developed, you lose the organisms that live there. But if something happens to humans, hypothetically, I don't know, we just get wiped out by a virus or something, the organisms from those hotspots can then sort of radiate out from that area and recolonize. So these hotspots are an ideal choice for nature reserves. Nature reserves, though, are usually biased. When we're talking about protecting biodiversity, usually we're talking about biodiversity of plants. You'll have places where carnivorous plants thrive. We've got to protect it. Beautiful plants thrive. You'll be biased toward vertebrates. We got to protect wolves, or we've got to protect bears, or we've got to protect raccoons, whatever. We don't so much care about the ugly things. People aren't out to protect, there's this earthworm only lives in this one area. We got to save this area. People don't care so much about that. So we got to be mindful of our own biases. Aquatic reserves are going to be vital to commercial fishing. They are vital to commercial fishing. I told you, fish are going extinct. They're disappearing rapidly. They're disappearing far faster than they're being replaced. And there have been calculations done. Basically, if we protect just a few square miles of the ocean and say, you cannot fish here, the fish population should rebound. Problem is, that's where all the best fishing is. That's where people want to go fishing, because there are tons of fish there. There we go. If we protect them, the fish population rebounds. There are going to be more fish throughout the ocean. Downside, that's where the best fishing is, and people want to sneak in there and capture as many fish as possible in order to get the highest profit. So we've got a solution. We just find it too difficult to enact it. So overfished populations can recover very quickly. And this happened with salmon. There's a very small region in Alaska that they were protecting and said, if we protect this region, this one right here, that was right by a power plant. They said, we have to put in these environmental regulations. They put in the environmental regulations about 15, 20 years ago when the salmon population was low. The salmon population began to skyrocket. Suddenly, people were collecting salmon all over the place. There was a change in the winds, not the winds. There was a change in politics. Somebody said, you know what? It's going to be really important for us to have that energy producing company running a plant right there. The environmental regulation went out. The salmon population almost immediately dropped. By protecting that one area for a short amount of time, you get the population to rebound. They picked it because they figured out that was where there was the highest genetic diversity and the most important spot to protect. We're not trying to protect everything. Protect a small area, and you can have an enormous impact. So there we go. By protecting a biological hotspot, you can maintain or increase genetic diversity and provide a region from which organisms can radiate outward and repopulate low population areas.